Greetings, Eric the Racket Scientist here, and as 2025 comes to a close, I thought I'd do something like a little special. So, I mean, I know in other segments of YouTube, such as car and electronics, people really like to do these end of the year videos, so I thought I'd give it a try for myself too, because I don't know really that anyone does this in the badminton world. So I thought I'd do my 2025 end of the year awards for rackets. Okay, so let's talk about rackets then. 2025 was a really fruitful year in terms of racket acquisition, mostly because I started my channel, so I was like really motivated to try things out and like, you know, show the world, review them and get them on camera and stuff like that. So I kind of really went crazy this year. So just to give you some stats here, in 2025, from January until now, I've bought 41 rackets, okay? So that's not including the rackets that were already in my collection, okay? So I acquired 41 rackets in 2025 alone. Now, I haven't kept all of them. I've already sold some of them, and of those 41 rackets, I sold 7 of those. And that's not the total amount I sold this year. I sold more than that. Probably sold over 10 rackets this year. But I was kind of too lazy to go back and check exactly what I sold this year. So the rewards that I'm going to present are all from those 41 rackets that I acquired this year. I think that's kind of the fair way to do it. Because I acquired so many, I'm going to have a lot of categories and awards this year. Anyways, yeah, let's go get started. So I think, so for most of these categories, I'm going to have 2 rackets. But then the last category, which is Racket of the Year, I'm going to have 3, and I am going to rank those. I'm going to have 3rd, 2nd, and 1st place. First category is disappointing rackets. So we have 2 rackets here in this category, two disappointing rackets. Now, I didn't really want to make, you know, kind of a negative category, because in general, I like to be, you know, kind of positive about equipment and rackets and stuff like that. But so let's get something out of the way here, which is that of all the top manufacturers, the odds of them making an actual objectively poor racket is extremely, extremely small, okay? So when you hear most people out there on the internet or at your local gym or say this is a bad racket, there's 99% chance that they're just wrong, that it's an opinion, right? I mean, think about it. Every single human that plays badminton is a little different in some sort of way, and most of the people out there in the world have little to no formal training, okay? So how can you just trust the opinion of just a random guy at the gym who, you know, doesn't have that much training, who's only used maybe 10 rackets in his life or whatever? But I think the difference is that, first of all, I have a much larger sample size than most people. In the over 100 rackets that I've owned in my life, very few of them, I would say, had actual bad traits. Like, most of them end up being personal preferences, or like, oh, this racket doesn't perform well in all situations and it just, you know, isn't accustomed to my playing style. So when I say disappointing rackets, these are more like, oh, I'm looking forward to using it and I think it'll work well for me, or, you know, it just didn't quite, you know, didn't quite pop, didn't quite work, didn't quite click, okay? So first off, on rackets that I was a little disappointed in using was the Li-Ning Aeronaut 9000C. Now, I don't have this one anymore. I sold it. You might know that this is a 3U racket, so I expected it to be a little heavy, but then one I got was really heavy, even for a 3U model. And because it was heavy, it was just, you know, kind of difficult for me to handle. And it's not that I wasn't used to Aeronaut. I've owned a couple other Aeronaut rackets. I used to own an Aeronaut 9000, the plain one, like the white one. I actually quite like that one. I used to own an Aeronaut 7000i. Yeah, and then there's this Aeronaut 9000C. But when I played with it, I personally felt that there was quite a bit of vibration, and it wasn't really as satisfying as the other Aeronaut rackets, or even, you know, there are other Aeronaut rackets that I played with and owned, or especially compared to modern Axelrod rackets. I just felt that I didn't really want to invest any more time in that racket, so I ended up selling it. Okay, next on disappointing rackets is the DriveX 12. Now, I don't think this is a bad racket, okay? I put this in my disappointing rackets of 2025 because my expectation was that I was gonna really love this racket and it was gonna really suit my playing style. I mean, I was a big fan of the 77 Pro, and I still am. And I was hoping the DriveX 12 would be kind of a similar Victor's answer to the 77 Pro as kind of like an all-around attacking racket that wasn't super stiff. It kind of was, but on the other hand, like I owned the DriveX 10 metallic for a while, and you know that was kind of the first metallic racket that Victor put out. That was a bit of a polarizing racket too, but I like that racket because it kind of had character, right? So the metallic shaft had this kind of specific feeling that, you know, some people like it, some people don't, but it had character, right? Like, you know, if you hit it correctly, it really resonated really nicely, and if you didn't, it would kind of punish you and whatever. And Victor started putting the metallic carbon fiber in a lot of their rackets now, and they also put in this DriveX 12. They didn't put in the name just because, like, you know, a lot of the top end rackets have metallic carbon fiber, so that's kind of just like the new standard. They added this you know, kind of foam in the frame to dampen the vibration, and I think that works. But the weird part is that, you know, after adding the metallic carbon fiber and then adding the dampening foam, it kind of lost its character. You know what I mean? Like, if you were going to try to make a racket that dampened the vibrations and wasn't super stiff and was user friendly, you know, why would you use the carbon fiber metallic, right? If you wanted something really resonant that brought out and let the metallic carbon fiber shine, why wouldn't you create a racket, you know, without that much dampening with the foam and with a wooden handle, actually? I think that the Auraspeed metallic 90K was a good choice to have with the wooden handle because you really get that metallic character shining through, whereas you don't with the DriveX 12. So it just feels like a normal racket. It's not a bad racket, but it's just a normal racket, and I very quickly felt like I learned everything I needed to know from that racket, so I don't really have a reason to hang on to it longer, so I'm probably going to sell it soon. I don't have it right now because I lent it to a friend, but next category is Quirky Rackets. Now, a lot of you know I like the weird stuff, okay? So I like picking up unique rackets, whether that's brands we usually don't see here in the United States or rackets with, you know, interesting features that we don't really see that often, okay? Okay, Quirky Rackets. First up, we have the Felet Woven TJ Power. Now this, from a distance, it might just look like kind of a normal racket, but the up close view of this racket reveals that it has some really crazy looking features in the frame. I think most notably is the T-joint, which is like kind of not, it doesn't end as an arc here, but there's actually just straight up a V. And then there's a lot of really weird and interesting features in terms of the frame recess and whatever. And the other quirk is that the max rated tension on this racket is, well, as it says, it's 42 pounds, which is absolutely ludicrous. I don't think I'm gonna, you know, go even close to that, but you know, it could make for a fun video. So I don't know, let me know in the comments if you want me to string this at a ridiculously high tension. Okay, the second quirky racket of 2025 is this Forza HT Precision 88S V2. I know that's a big mouthful and it sounds very confusing, but Forza's way of naming the rackets is actually, well, it actually makes sense, right? Like, HT Precision is the line. The 88 stands for number of grommet holes. So one of the ways they distinguish their models is that a lot of them have different patterns. Now, most modern rackets have a 76 hole pattern. You'll find some with 72, and you'll find some maybe with 80, but like outside of that, and then there's the Yonex 68 hole pattern. But outside of that, anything outside of that is, in my opinion, unusual. So this is 88S, and the 88 stands for, you know, I know 88S is like a Yonex model, which is kind of funny, but that's just a coincidence. 88 stands for the number of grommets on this racket. So this is an 88 hole pattern. So yeah, this is a quirky racket. Oh, and then the S stands for stiff. So 88S means 88 holes stiff. So there's an 88M, that's 88 holes in medium. And then there's also, it's totally crazy, but there is also a 92S, so like 92 holes stiff. And then V2, I guess, is just the second version. So actually it does make sense. So when you see a Forza racket and you see the name, you'll know exactly how many grommet holes there are, what stiffness it is, and yeah, that's all you need to know. Yeah, it was the first pattern over 80 holes that I've tried. Okay, I won't go into this too much, but at first when you do soft shots, it just kind of feels like a racket with slightly higher tension than you might be used to. So like, for example, if I string at 27 usually, then I have this racket, I might think that it feels like 28 or 29. But the real difference comes when you start to hit harder. Man, this thing is loud, like very loud. If you're curious and you have a chance to buy an 88 hole racket, I definitely recommend it. So yeah, so Forza has those, and I believe Felet also has an 88 hole pattern racket. So the third category is exciting purchases. So these are rackets that I was most excited to purchase and acquire for my collection. And first up, we will have this Axe Force 80 Chunlong edition. Okay, a lot of you will know that the Axe Force 80 is one of my favorite rackets of all time, just because it's fun. And this is a special edition of that racket. And I knew about this racket for a while. When it first kind of came out, I saw pictures of it. Like most limited editions, it's kind of difficult to get, so it was like only available in China, and you know, definitely more expensive than the original one. You know, and I wasn't really willing to pay that much money for a special edition racket because, you know, I like Chunlong, you know, don't get me wrong, but I wouldn't say that I'm like a super fan of his. Like, I'm not desperate to get his racket or anything like that, but I did think that it looked cool. Like, I really like the red paint, and I think this is a really nice looking racket. And yeah, I had the chance to pick this up just because I was randomly browsing through Facebook Marketplace one day and it came up, and I was really surprised because I was like, oh, I know what this is. I never thought I'd see it here in the United States, so I bought it. Yeah, I mean, it was a little pricey for a used racket, but I don't regret it because this is something that actually, you know, I knew from a long time ago that if I had the chance to buy it, I probably would. And second, for exciting purchases, I don't have it in my house right now because it's getting strung, but it is the Arcsaber Z/Slash in 3U, Japan code. Correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was the first Z racket that Yonex put out. So it came out in sometime in the early 2010s. I don't remember exactly which year. It could be 2011 or 2012. And first Z racket to come out. So, you know, it was quite there was quite a stir about it, right? You know, everyone was like, oh, you know, what's a Z racket? You know, it's the top line, it's expensive, it's demanding, whatever. And that was when I was in high school. So this was around when I started badminton. I was only like, you know, what's probably like 16 years old or something. This racket came out and I was like, oh man, that looks like a cool racket. But I already had my rackets, and you know, I wasn't an enthusiast back then, and I definitely didn't have the money to buy the racket if I wanted to. And I remember one of my friends got it, and he was playing with it. You know, as I went to college and stuff, and you know, Arcsabers got discontinued, I kind of lost my chance to try it. But I always thought about like, oh, you know, the racket from, you know, my high school days, those rackets, if I could use them now, what would it be like? So yeah, I was just browsing one day and I was like, you know what, maybe I should get one. I mean, another one of the problems is that the 3U rackets of the time, so, you know, rackets like Arcsaber 11 or even the Duoras, you know, Duora Z-Strike or whatever, Duora 10, in the US at least, all the 3U rackets were sold with G4 size grips, okay? My hands aren't that big. I personally prefer G5 size grips, which is why I had to end up buying a JP code one. I haven't played with it yet, so really excited to try and see. All right, fourth category, dark horses. Now, what is a dark horse? It's kind of like, I guess, the opposite of disappointing, right? It's one where the actual result or the actual thing exceeds your expectations. These are rackets that either I had a low opinion or had no expectations for and ended up liking them, or the rackets that I had some expectation and it ended up far exceeding my expectation. So first on the list of dark horse rackets is this Babolat X Feel Origin. So I picked this up when I was in Europe just because I was looking for unique rackets to pick up. And yeah, so I saw that, you know, Babolat badminton rackets were available. You might know Babolat as a tennis brand primarily. The rackets are reasonably popular in the tennis world and even in the US. As far as their badminton gear goes, you know, it makes sense that they make badminton rackets, but I don't really know that they're available, you know, anywhere else in the world. So I was like, oh, I'll pick it up. And it wasn't that expensive. It did take me a while to figure out how the racket lineups worked because they, you don't follow the same convention as other brands. This is my dark horse racket because when I picked this up, it was like pretty cheap and affordable. So, and I didn't know anything about Babolat rackets, so I had no expectations for how this racket plays. It could be a total piece of shit, and I would have been like, oh yeah, okay, cool, you know, piece of shit, whatever. But I played with this, and surprisingly, I really liked it. I would say the most similar racket to this would probably be a Nanoflare 700 Pro. So it advertises itself as even balance, but I would say it's more towards the slightly headlight end of the spectrum, and it says that it's 3U, but after gripping it my style, the weight ends up being closer to 4U and fully recessed, so kind of like a, you know, a speed racket that's not super stiff. One interesting quirk is that it has two fewer main strings than most rackets. So this only has 20 mains, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 instead of the 11 on one half of the frame. So this has 20 mains as opposed to the usual 22. So that makes the string bed a little bit softer. But yeah, this is a really great kind of entry-level racket. If you're someone who lives in Europe and you're looking for something that's kind of easy to get into and easy to play, this would be a good racket to pick up. Or if you're curious about it and you are visiting Europe or something like that, I wouldn't go out of my way for it, but it impressed me. I had no expectations for this racket and it was fun. Okay, number 2 on my list of dark horse rackets is this Voltric Lindan Force. Now these are, I think, people who know this racket know that it's quite iconic. I mean, anything with Lindan's name on it, it's going to be like cool and expensive and whatever. These days, these go for a pretty crazy price. Like, I think Z-Force 2s nowadays are probably one of the most valuable, rare and valuable Yonex rackets, or maybe just rackets, period. And then these tend to be pretty pricey too. Now, you might be wondering, okay, if it's so pricey and desirable, how the hell is it going to be a dark horse, right? Because you already have such high expectations for it. Well, to be honest, like, I had the expectation that, okay, this was going to play very nicely as a singles racket. The real reason why this Lindan Force is a dark horse to me is because of how easy it is to use, and not just in singles, but in doubles too. If it sits in the same segment as the Z-Force 2 and stuff like that, you would expect this to be, quite head heavy, difficult to maneuver, difficult to hit the sweet spot and whatever. But this racket is surprisingly quite easy to use, really easy to maneuver. I didn't feel that it was too slow for doubles. I didn't feel that it was difficult to time or anything. It is very head heavy, but for some reason the design of this racket is just incredibly approachable, and it doesn't feel any more difficult to use than like a 77 Pro, for example. So I'm still trying to figure out why I have such an easy time with this racket. I don't know if it's just me or whatever, but I'm gonna try to figure that out, and then we'll see. We're finally down to the final category, which is Racket of the Year. So just a reminder, there are 3 rackets in this category. It's gonna be 3rd, 2nd, and 1st place. So starting with number 3 in 3rd place. So in 3rd place, I've got this Nanoflare 700 Pro. Now, I think a lot of you probably could have guessed that this was gonna be in my list somewhere, because this is one of the 2 full reviews I did for 2025 on my channel. Yes, I'm sorry that I don't do more full reviews, but those take so much time to do. There's so much filming and editing involved, and you can tell I love this racket because of the 2 reviews that I did, I chose to invest the time to review this racket. The reason why I think this is an amazing racket is because it's very easy to use, it's very versatile. In fact, I used this a lot in the earlier part of the year once I came back from my injury, so when my finger was still weak and also when my shoulder kind of was injured and was recovering as well. So this is such an easy to use racket. This is what I was able to use and even play tournament with when my shoulder was still weak, when I had a rotator cuff injury, when my fingers were weak, and I was still able to play relatively well with this racket. So, super all-around, good all-around option. And I would say it's still underrated even as a top-line Yonex racket. Like, most people understand that top-line Yonex rackets are good already, but even so, I still think this is underrated. Okay, in second place, we have the Axe Force 90 New from Li-Ning. So I used to own an Axe Force 90 Tiger, and my friend had the Dragon. I also own a shit ton of Axe Force 80s. I own the Axe Force 100. Love the Axe Force series. But the Axe Force 90 Tiger was one of the most frustrating rackets for me to use. I could not really figure out what the best way to use that racket was. I think there was just something about the design that didn't really work well for me. And frankly, for a lot of people, I think a lot of people complain that they aren't able to get power out of that racket. The Dragon has this, I think, about the same length shaft as the Axe Force 100, which is quite short, and then the Tiger was a little bit longer. Now you see, the problem here is that you reduce the amount of air resistance in the head significantly, because not only did you change the frame, but you also made it smaller, but you also made the shaft effectively quite a bit stiffer by shortening it significantly. And so it was super hard to load up that racket, like the original Axe Force 90s. You had to be very strong to do it or had very specific timing. So I think Li-Ning figured out that they kind of made a bit of a mistake. And the reason I actually didn't have this problem with the 100, a lot of people say that the 100 is demanding, and yeah, it should be. It's a top-line racket. But the 100 has a thinner shaft too, so that also helps. And surprisingly, the Axe Force 100 had a bigger head than the 90, which brought back some of that air resistance. So it actually was not as difficult, in my opinion. Li-Ning kind of figured out that, the design wasn't so great for the 90 Tiger and Dragon, and they came out with this new model. So what did they change? I haven't put them side by side, but the head, the frame looks very similar. Biggest change by far is the shaft length. So they lengthened it. Not only did they lengthen it, they made it longer than the Axe Force 80. It's actually, the shaft on this racket is actually longer than the Axe Force 80s by like a couple millimeters. And that makes a huge difference because, again, this head and the frame is more aerodynamic than the Axe Force 80, which takes away its ability to load up under swing. You make the shaft even longer, then you give the user room to be able to flex it. So as a result, you've got your very polarizing rackets in your Axe Force 100 and your Axe Force 80, where one is, loads up very slowly with lots of air resistance. You got your Axe Force 100, which you have to swing faster with wrists, more wrist in your swing, and it's very demanding. And now you have a perfect middle ground. Okay, you have something that kind of is more aerodynamic, cuts through the air a little bit better, but suddenly is not super hard to swing anymore. Like, you can get flex out of this racket. I still think that it's kind of designed a little more towards singles, but it does well in doubles too. I won't say it's an amazing doubles racket, but I've been using it in doubles, and yeah, it's fine. Might say that it belongs in a similar segment to the Yonex Astrox A8D Pro. Maybe not the 3rd gen one, but maybe the 2nd gen one, which was a little more solid feeling, or even the 1st gen. Just, kind of a good backline power racket that, has a bit of speed to it. I definitely want to give props to Li-Ning for actually adapting, right? Like, listening to the feedback and coming out with a new generation of the racket and it actually being great at what it does. So like that's what we really like to see from manufacturers, and that's what we see here. Drum roll please for #1 racket of the year, and that is the Redson ESG. Now, if you watch all my stuff, you are not surprised at this choice. Reason being, you should know by now that I really like Redson rackets, especially the grommetless design. The MG and the SG were some of my most staple main rackets throughout the years. And then Redson came out with this absolutely gorgeous ESG, which has 0 grommets. It's got an 80-hole pattern, but it is beautifully manufactured, super smooth through the air. You know, just a really amazing racket in every way. Just as easy to use as the MG and SG, but you know, one little step up in terms of smoothness and power and everything. So this is really like an amazing piece of racket technology. If you ever have the chance to even look at one, I, you know, would say definitely take your time and look closely and appreciate what it is. This is a really great racket, really good all-rounder. I use it in tournaments, amazing. I could recommend this to almost anybody, and yeah, I'm definitely going to keep this in my collection probably forever if I can. I really don't know how Redson is or even can improve this, like come out with something better. So, you know, the grommetless feeling is just kind of unmatched. I will say that there's not too much of an improvement from the contact feeling of like the MG or SG to this, because like the MG and SG, they have corner grommets, and then the single pass holes are grommetless. This one just has 0 grommets overall. The difference between this and like an MG or SG is much smaller than the difference between an MG or SG and a normal racket with grommets. So, but it makes up for that in the other aspects, which is like the head weight and then the smoothness of the racket. So yeah, these are super nice. Okay, so that's it for my racket awards of 2025. And I'm gonna close this video by looking towards 2026 and talk a little bit about what I'm looking forward to trying and buying in 2026. Taking a look at my list here in 2026, Li-Ning is coming out with a few nice models, and I plan to, you know, pick them up. So first on the list is the Li-Ning Axe-Force 100 version 2. So kind of similar how they redid the Axe-Force 90. Li-Ning also heard the feedback on the Axe-Force 100 that, you know, it's too demanding, it's hard to use. They made a second version of that too, and a lot of people say it's more playable. On the other end, we have some new Halbertech rackets. So I'm a pretty big fan of that series. I have the 7,000, 8,000, and 9,000 rackets. And next year, there is going to be a Halbertech 7,000 new, which I think was interesting because I actually didn't think the Halbertech 7,000 was flawed. I thought it was perfectly fine as it was, so I'm surprised that they're redoing it, and I'm curious to see what the differences are. And then, of course, the Halbertech 9000 Power, which is going to be an evolution of the purple and green Halbertech 9000. That one was, you know, pretty heavily marketed. They got a lot of pro players to use that, but I suppose it didn't quite land in the market how they hoped it would. So coming out with a new model, and yeah, I'm excited to pick that one up. Honestly, I didn't mind the original 9000. I thought that one was okay too. I didn't think it was perfect though. I did think that they probably could have done something a little better. So it'll be interesting to see, yeah, how that differs from the original 9000. Okay, next on my list, Astrox 77 Pro. This one is this is just because I've owned a few of these. All right, I've owned a few of these. I really like that racket. Oh, man, I have like such bad luck with 77 Pros because I got one. You know, I had it for a while. I lent it to a friend. They broke it. That person went to find me a new one in Taiwan. That's actually when I broke my finger, so I couldn't play badminton anyways. So they bought it back for me, and then they broke that one too. So I don't have a 77 Pro in my collection, and I've just been putting it off. Part of me is hoping deep down that they come out with a new color, because As much as I love that racket, I'm not a fan of that orange color, or like most of the other paint jobs. I think the red one is probably the best one, but man, they had 4 different chances to make this racket look good. And I gotta say, I don't think any of them are that great. So I'm really just hoping they come out with a new paint job, but even if they don't, I'm gonna pick this one up anyways, just because like I like the racket so much. Yeah, from Victor, HS Plus. That's been around for a while. It's not like a new racket or anything. I just haven't had the chance to pick it up. I've gotten to try it, but I still want to own it because I have an HS original, which I really like, and I do want to compare the two. So we'll see if and when I get my hands on that. Okay, next on the list is a Fleet Woven 1000 Evo. So I got my first Fleet racket this year, and I really liked it. It was a Fleet Woven, was a different model, but it was kind of more of an easier to use, easy even balance, kind of a Nanoflare-esque one. But I really enjoyed that one, so I want another model, and I want something that's a little more aggressive and like head heavy. So whatever Mizuno is coming out with. So some people may know Mizuno came out with the Acroforce series this year, starting with the Acroforce 100 and 300 and 600. But they're definitely going to fill out their lineup, across the next year or so. So I highly expect and anticipate there to be more Mizuno rackets on the way in the Acroforce series or in other series. I am just overall a big fan of Mizuno rackets and always look forward to new ones. I guess that about wraps it up. I hope you enjoyed my Rackets of 2025 video. I sure hope I don't buy as many rackets in 2026 as I did this year, because 41 rackets is a lot of rackets and I'm running out of room. So, I hope next year's video will be a little bit shorter than that, but I hope you enjoyed nevertheless. If you have any comments, questions, definitely leave them down in the comments, and I'll see you in 2026.